Welcome back to Superbly Said Advanced English Vocabulary and Phrases. I'm super excited for today because our deep dive is based on a really fantastic lesson from SpeakDuo. And it's all centered around some, very specific vocabulary pulled from the Greek interpreter.
Oh, yeah. It's a great source text. Some really, rich language in there.
Exactly. And hey, just really quickly, if you are looking to build your speaking confidence, you should absolutely go to speakduo.com to meet new people from around the world who are practicing English on video calls. It's just such a great way to become more confident with your English speaking abilities.
It really is a fantastic tool. And for our session today, just so you know, we are skipping the basics entirely. This deep dive is specifically tailored for advanced English learners.
Right. No beginner stuff today.
Exactly. So we aren't going to spend time, justifying why you need these words. We are simply going to hand you the precise linguistic tools you need to command high-stakes workplace conversations or to totally dominate an exam like the IELTS speaking test.
Love that. Let's just jump straight in then. So to make these words actually stick, let's build a scenario. Imagine you're dropped into the middle of, a notoriously disastrous corporate merger.
Ooh, stressful.
Right. Very high-stakes environment, tensions are running super high, and the absolute biggest hurdle you face is trying to communicate with someone on the other side who simply, refuses to show their hand. They just won't talk.
Right. Well, the perfect word for that specific kind of behavioral silence is reticence. And it is crucial to understand the nuance here, like how it differs from simply being shy.
Because shyness is more of an emotion, right?
Precisely. Shyness is fundamentally a feeling. It's social anxiety or timidity.
Yeah.
Think of shyness as, like a locked door where the person inside has lost the key and is just too anxious to open it.
Oh, wow. Okay, so they might actually want to talk, but fear is holding them back.
Exactly. Reticence, on the other hand, is like a heavily guarded vault. The person has the key, They just actively refuse to let you inside. It's this habitual tendency to keep your thoughts or opinions totally hidden.
So it's a choice.
Yeah. A person can be fiercely confident, incredibly competent, and yet still display profound reticence. They're using silence as a strategy.
That makes a ton of sense. So going back to our merger scenario, you might observe something like, his reticence made it hard for the team to know if the boss actually liked the project proposal.
Yes, exactly.
He's not scared of the room at all. He is deliberately holding his cards close to his chest. But, that creates a massive problem, right? If the person holding the budget numbers is exhibiting reticence, how do you actually get the information out of them?
Well, you have to worm it out of them.
Wait, hold on. Why worm it out? Why not just say you found out the numbers? If I find out the details, the result is the same, isn't it?
The end result might be the same, but the mechanism, the way you got there, is entirely different. Finding something out is completely neutral.
Like someone accidentally CC'd you on an email.
Right, exactly. It requires zero friction. But worming something out implies you are navigating against someone's reluctance. It's a gradual, careful extraction of information.
Oh, I see. It's like a delicate little heist.
Exactly. So if you were in the IELTS Part 2 test, right, and you had to describe a difficult conversation, you could say, I had to worm the details of the budget cuts out of my manager by asking gentle, indirect questions over coffee.
That paints such a good picture. You didn't just walk up and ask. You tactically maneuvered them.
Yeah.
But I imagine there's a downside to that tactic.
Oh, absolutely. The process of meticulously worming information out of someone who is reticent is painful, and it will inevitably, draw out your meeting.
Let me challenge that one really quick. If a meeting is taking too long, isn't that just delaying it?
Not quite. There's a subtle difference. If you delay a meeting, you are moving its starting point, right? Like pushing it from Tuesday to Thursday.
Okay.
But if you draw something out, you are taking an active event or a process and making it last much, much longer than it needs to. Think of pulling a piece of taffy until it's just painfully thin.
Right. So it's that classic workplace complaint. Like, the weekly sync was needlessly drawn out by side conversations and repeated clarifications.
Yes. What should have been a 20-minute update became an hour and a half.
And very often, those meetings get drawn out because someone is asked to, elaborate on something.
Well, perfect transition. Yes. And here is another great nuance. People use elaborate and explain interchangeably all the time.
I do that. Are they actually that different?
They are, yeah. It depends entirely on where you are in the timeline of an idea. You explain a brand new concept, like from scratch.
Taking someone from zero basic understanding.
Right. But you elaborate on something that has already been stated. You're adding specific, intricate details to an existing framework.
So an interaction with your boss might go, that's a great initial concept. Could you elaborate on the specific steps we need to take for the launch?
Perfect. The framework is already there. You just want them to expand the thought.
Okay, so let's put all of this together in our corporate scenario. You've got reticent executives, you're constantly trying to worm information out of them, and every single meeting is being completely drawn out.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Right. I mean, that is just a recipe for someone becoming utterly exasperated.
It really is. It's a fantastic high-level descriptor for that exact feeling, but we should clarify the intensity.
Yeah, because if my laptop takes an extra minute to load, I'm annoyed. But exasperation feels like a lot heavier.
Annoyance is a paper cut. Exasperated is the feeling of enduring 1,000 paper cuts. It's this intense irritation that comes specifically from repeated annoyances or failures.
So it's hitting a brick wall over and over.
Exactly. So for an IELTS Part 2 response about a stressful day, you'd say, I became completely exasperated after dealing with the same software crash for the 5th time that week.
It's the sheer repetition. But, looking at the other side of the table, while you're sitting there exasperated, the person on the receiving end might be pained by your frustration.
That's a beautifully observant phrase, pained by something. And it's distinctly different from saying someone was hurt.
Because being hurt is mostly internal, right? I could be deeply hurt by something you said and just smile blankly.
Precisely. Hurt can be completely invisible. But being pained by something means being visibly upset or uncomfortable by words or actions.
Oh, so you can actually see it.
Yeah, usually they are trying to maintain composure, but you see that micro expression, the subtle wince, or the tightening of the jaw.
So in a performance review context, you'd say he looked visibly pained by the harsh criticism but tried to stay professional.
Spot on. You're describing that physical, somatic reaction.
And when a meeting gets to the point where one person is exasperated and another is pained, somebody definitely needs to step in and intervene.
For sure. And we really have to draw a hard line here between intervene and interfere.
Oh, yeah. I always feel like interfering sounds, I don't know, a bit malicious.
It definitely has a negative connotation. Interfering is meddling in a situation where you don't belong, but intervening is purposeful.
So you're stepping in specifically to change or stop a bad situation.
Exactly. So a workplace conflict example. The project manager had to intervene to resolve the dispute between the design and engineering teams.
They're acting as a necessary circuit breaker. I like that. So let's pivot slightly from the emotional side of work to the more analytical side.
Sure, like how professionals handle incomplete information.
Yeah, exactly. Often you'll hear someone point out that a report is deficient in something. But why use deficient when lacking is right there?
Well, deficient in TIA is much more formal and highly specific. You'd use it in professional or academic contexts to describe something clearly missing a necessary quality.
So it's not just informal conversation.
Right. You can lack style, but a document is deficient in facts.
Okay, so a boss might say, the initial marketing proposal was deficient in key demographic data, so we had to intervene and pause the launch.
Perfect example.
But that brings up a massive question for me. If a proposal is deficient in facts, how do we fill in the blanks? Are we just guessing?
This is where we need to separate conjecture from inference.
Because, honestly, conjecture often just sounds like corporate jargon for I'm making a wild guess.
It can definitely be used that way, but technically, conjecture is a tentative idea based on highly limited evidence. It's a highly educated guess.
So how does an inference differ?
An inference is a logical conclusion drawn firmly from available concrete clues. Think of solving a problem.
Okay, so for an IELTS test, I could say, my suggestion about the server crash was pure conjecture until we checked the logs. From those error codes, we made a definitive inference about the cause.
That is a brilliant distinction. The conjecture is the brainstorm. The inference is the solid conclusion.
Awesome. All right, let's move from data to the actual people we work with. Let's start at the bottom of the expertise ladder with a dilettante.
Dilettante is such a fantastic descriptor, but people mix it up with amateur.
What's the difference?
Well, an amateur does something for love rather than money, but they can be highly dedicated, A dilettante is a casual hobbyist who just dabbles without any serious commitment.
Ah, so like workplace gossip. He acts like a tech expert, but he's really just a dilettante who read one coding book and moved on to something else.
Exactly. It implies a fundamental lack of depth, and the exact opposite of that is someone who is preeminent.
Preeminent. That sounds incredibly authoritative. But how is that different from just being famous or excellent?
Someone can be famous without actually having skill, right? And lots of people are excellent. But preeminent means being clearly the absolute best or most respected authority in a specific field.
So, IELTS Part 2, describing someone you admire. She is the preeminent researcher in renewable energy, known globally for her focused work.
Yes, she stands entirely alone at the top.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Sometimes working too hard to become preeminent, or maybe just dealing with way too many dilettantes, can lead to misanthropy.
It's a dark evolution, but yeah, misanthropy is an active, general dislike or distrust of humanity as a whole.
Isn't that just being an introvert?
Not at all. An introvert just recharges their battery by being alone. Misanthropy is an active distrust of people.
Oh, wow. So in casual conversation, you might joke, after 10 years in retail customer service, he developed a mild sense of misanthropy and preferred the company of his dogs.
A very common trajectory, sadly. All right, to round out the vocabulary before our quiz, let's look at 2 action phrases. First, step across.
Is that just like walking?
It implies a very quick, brief trip to a nearby, usually adjacent place.
Got it. So at work, I'll just step across to the HR department to drop off these forms and be right back.
Exactly. Highly efficient. And the final phrase is to carry someone off.
Which instantly sounds like a kidnapping to me.
Well, it can be. Kidnapping is strictly illegal abduction, whereas carry-off can mean taken away by force or deception, like the villains in our source text.
Right.
But it can also just describe literally physically removing someone from a scene.
Like in sports. The paramedics had to carry the injured player off the field. Or the ruthless villains planned to aggressively carry the prince off.
Absolutely. Both work perfectly.
All right. We have covered a lot of ground. Now it's time to test your memory with our interactive vocabulary quiz.
Yes. So here's how this works. We will read a question with options A, B, and C. We'll repeat the target phrase a lot to keep it fresh in your mind.
I'll tell you when to pause the deep dive if you need a second to think.
Exactly. And then we'll jump right in with the answer and a brief explanation. Ready?
Let's do it. Question 1. Which sentence uses the phrase worm something out correctly, based on the lesson? Option A. The clever detective patiently managed to worm the hidden truth out of the suspect.
Option B. The frustrated gardener tried to quickly worm the invasive parasites out of the soil.
Or option C. The flexible gymnast attempted to smoothly worm the difficult routine out of the competition. Feel free to pause the deep dive here if you need to think about the answer.
All right, the correct answer is option A. Remember, worm something out is about extracting information reluctantly, like a careful psychological heist.
Spot on. Question 2. Select the context where the phrase draw something out is most appropriately used. Option A. The incredibly talented artist decided to beautifully draw something out on the large canvas.
Option B. The highly indecisive committee managed to needlessly draw the tedious administrative process out today.
Or option C. The experienced bank manager attempted to securely draw something out of the main vault. Feel free to pause the deep dive here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option B. Drawing something out is all about prolonging a process, like making a meeting last way too long.
Excellent. Question 3. In which situation is someone accurately described as a dilettante? Option A. The celebrated virtuoso pianist was universally acknowledged as a profoundly dedicated and serious dilettante.
Option B. The highly respected international dilettante negotiated the complex peace treaty between the warring nations.
Or option C. The wealthy aristocratic gentleman was merely a dilettante who briefly studied various obscure sciences. Feel free to pause the deep dive here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is option C. A dilettante is a casual dabbler, not someone with profound dedication.
Perfect. Question 4. Which response best demonstrates the correct usage of the advanced adjective preeminent? Option A. The highly esteemed university professor remains the preeminent authority on ancient Greek historical linguistics.
Option B. The dark storm cloud suggested a preeminent disaster was rapidly approaching the coastal town.
Or option C. The researchers conducted several preeminent trials before finally launching the actual comprehensive scientific study. Feel free to pause the deep dive here if you need to think about the answer.
And the answer is option A. Preeminent means being the very best or top authority in a specific field.
Halfway there. Question 5. How would a professional accurately use the noun reticence? Option A. The tired, aging patient unfortunately suffered from a severe medical condition involving progressive reticence.
Option B. His unusual habitual reticence made it incredibly difficult for colleagues to understand his perspective.
Or option C. The incredibly wealthy executive happily announced his early reticence from the intense corporate world. Feel free to pause the deep dive here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option B. Reticence is that guarded vault, the quiet, habitual reluctance to share your thoughts.
Question 6. Which scenario perfectly illustrates the concept of conjecture? Option A. The investigative journalist admitted that her surprising theory was based entirely on unverified conjecture.
Option B. The incredibly talented theatrical magician performed an impressive conjecture during this spectacular evening show.
Or option C. The busy highway construction project created a massive traffic conjecture near the city center. Feel free to pause the deep dive here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct choice is option A. Conjecture is a tentative idea based on highly limited or unverified evidence.
Love it. Question 7. Which sentence accurately utilizes the advanced phrase, elaborate on something? Option A. The incredibly skilled artisan promised to beautifully elaborate on the decorated ancient wooden furniture.
Option B. The competing corporate teams were suddenly forced to closely elaborate on the difficult project.
Or option C. The senior project manager asked the new analyst to clearly elaborate on the proposal. Feel free to pause the deep dive here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer here is option C. To elaborate on something means adding specific detail to a concept that has already been introduced.
And our final question, question 8. Which of the following statements correctly uses the phrase, carry someone off? Option A. The incredibly strong paramedic managed to carefully carry the injured athlete off the field.
Option B. The ruthless historical villains plan to aggressively carry the wealthy young prince off tonight.
Or option C. The remarkably offensive comedian managed to quickly carry the entire live audience off tonight. Feel free to pause the deep dive here if you need to think about the answer.
So, based on our specific villain example of taking someone by force or deception, the target answer is option B. Though, option A is a particularly valid literal use too.
Fantastic job making it through that quiz. Tackling advanced vocabulary like this really directly impacts your fluency and your confidence, whether you're at work or taking the IELTS test.
It truly does. And as we close out, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Think about the subtle difference between telling your boss you made an assumption versus telling them you made an inference.
Oh yeah, huge difference.
Right. Words don't just describe your thoughts, they signal your professional credibility. How might upgrading just 1 or 2 words change the way people perceive your expertise tomorrow?
That is such a provocative thought to end on. Remember to keep practicing and exploring these nuances. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.